Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today.
When I sat down to pull together the conversations from July through September, I kept trying to find one clean theme, something neat that tied together all these athletes as one. But, the truth is, they don't line up in any obvious way. Come from totally different worlds. A climber who reverse engineers the impossible, a 65-year-old world record holding skateboarder still bombing down hills, a swimmer rebuilding trust after injury, a paddler facing whales in the dark, a skier humbled by Mongolia, an ultra endurance swimmer unraveling in the Pacific, a pair in their 70s discovering new sports together. They don't overlap much on paper, but as I sat with the stories, one feeling kept returning to me. So many of the moments that stayed with me happened at the edges of comfort, not just physical discomfort, though there was plenty of that, but the emotional kind. The I am not sure I can do this kind. The I am not who I used to be kind. The something in me is changing kind. Some guests found clarity there. Some found fear. Some found themselves. And some rebuilt themselves. But all of them, in one way or another, kept going. This episode is a small collection of those edges, the moments where people step forward, even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. And if one of those clips grabs you, I hope you will go back and listen to the full conversation. Yet, I apologize, they are not always in order of when the podcast episode was released this quarter. But if you just search for names or just scroll down the episodes from July to September of this year, you will find them. Every single one of these episodes goes far deeper than what fits into a highlight reel. All right, folks, let's jump in. One thing I have always admired about Sonnie Trotter is how he treats big goals, not as these heroic leaps, but almost as something mathematical, something you can break apart and understand piece by piece. In this moment, he talks about the discipline of reverse engineering hard things and why the path towards a dream often looks a lot smaller, simpler, and more humble than we imagine. And as you are listening, notice how calm he is about it, how grounded. This isn't bravado, it's clarity. Here is Sonnie.
At the end of the day, I'm just a climbing nerd. And I really like to reverse engineer my objectives. And I think I started doing that like quite early on in my climbing. I'd be like, okay, I want to climb 14C or 14D or whatever it was, back in 2000. And I was like, and this style is in the wall is in this angle or this angle. And I knew that if I did things at this angle, it just wouldn't prepare me for this angle. Like I just reversed everything. And I was like, okay, well, and if I need to do 80 moves in this style, right? How do I prepare my body for 80 repetitions of this style at my limit? And so I think I always just reversed engineered things. I always wanted to be a little bit stronger than I needed to be to climb the route. And I still approach climbing like that. I still approach my goals today like that, because it's not reasonable for me anyway. Maybe for like Adam Ondra, it's fine, but, or for people who are, capable of doing so much volume, I don't know. But for me, I had to pick certain climbs in certain areas over phases of time and be like, I'm just going to focus on this one style, because I felt like I couldn't be a V12, V13 boulderer in this style and then go to Smith Rock and climb to Boulder not to be in the same, like, or whatever it is, like in the exact same window.
Or
I feel like
climb at that style at its zenith.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
perform at like a lower level of intensity. But
Yeah.
to perform optimally, you had to kind of prepare yourself in that style.
Yeah. And I needed a little bit of time to shift and prepare myself. And so with that particular route, I knew that these pitches were long and technical and pumpy. And I knew that they were back to back to back. And so when I went cragging, the way that I was structured my day is I would go for half a day. I'd run back to the camper or whatever. And then Lydia, my wife, would take half a day to go bouldering with her girlfriends or go for a long run or something like that. So we would structure the day where I had half the day. And I never climbed in the middle of the day. I always climbed in the morning or the evening. And then my wife, so that way we felt very like balanced. And there was times like, of course, when I was up on El Cap, that was most of the day. But when I was just cragging, if I was in Smith Rock, I would try to bang out 4 or 5 long pitches very quickly and then be finished by 1 o'clock, And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I would take the main objective and then I would reverse it and be like, how can I focus on these climbs in this style, in this condensed period of time that would help me get higher fitness for the actual day of attempts,
Sure.
Yeah. And so like even today, like I actually remember, I remember reading about Francois Legrand again back in 1998. And he would do something like, I believe it was 300 513 moves a day. And
Whoa.
so he was on like, your training board, he'd have all the different angles, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 degrees. But he wouldn't finish training unless he did about 300 movements of around 513 level. And I was fascinated by that amount of, well, 1, volume, but 2, like approach, because, when you're doing World Cup competitions and the finals is a 13D or 14A on site back in the 1990s, like your fitness had to be through the roof. And so I was like, well, how many moves am I doing a day? Like, am I doing 300? Am I doing 400? Am I doing 100? When we go to the climbing gym and we start talking with our friends and we do 3 pitches, and we're like, oh yeah, I'm kind of tired. I'm going to go home. Like,
Yeah.
did you actually like do enough to be better the next week or the next month? Or are you just doing enough to have a good time and maintain, And I'm not saying it's all about results, but if there's goals and objectives you have, I think it's important to look at it more seriously, more analytically. Yeah.
And even in a lifestyle sport like rock climbing, and even on a big road trip, I think there's a lesson here on how one can break down like really big, audacious goals into manageable chunks. Because I think myself and maybe people listening, we don't always think of, a route and a goal in that kind of way, where you can like think of the total number of moves and maybe think of like how one can like replicate that kind of intensity, that kind of volume at the gym or at a different crag, and think about that big objective, but think about like how you can get something out of your day at the crag,
Yeah.
which will help one get to that big objective.
And I want to be,
yeah.
sorry, I just want to be clear. Like, it's not something I do all the time. It's when I realize that there's a climb or an objective that's very important to me. And, I like, I'm a climber through and through, lifestyle, like everything, but there are times where I ramp it up to try to do something. And then there are times when I come down the other side, and it's this journey of these waves. And so for sure, like, I think helping to look at climbing just a little bit more, I don't know, maybe the word is just mindful, like being like, am I actually doing something that's going to help me achieve my goal or not? So I just think sometimes that's helpful in life. And I just want to say that it's never like a straight up line. It's always these waves.
I think Judi Oyama brings a kind of courage that's almost easy to overlook. The courage to keep showing up for something you love, even when the world has told you 100 reasons why you shouldn't. She is in her 60s now, skating with the same fire she had as a teenager, and what she shares here traces that whole thread. Rebellion, identity, falling down, standing up, and the quiet determination to keep going just because it matters to you. This is Judi at her most honest.
I know that it fed my drive, because the more people kind of counted me out, or like, I remember going to having teammates that when I rode for Santa Cruz, and we were supposed to go to a contest, and they told me to meet at a certain time at their house, and they took off 10 minutes before I got there. And I had my dad drive me all the way up to the contest, and which was like an hour away. And so, I was used to being left out. And so I just felt like in my mind, it was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. And then I just kept skating. And I feel like I always got compared to Peggy Oki, who is really sweet on the Dogtown Z Boys. But I still get, even in my own town, hey, you're Peggy Oki or whatever. So I'm trying to like just prove that there's more than one Asian American skateboarder, and girl skateboarders, women skateboarders like that are unknown, because if you didn't get in the magazine, no one knew you. And now, because of social media, you can be found and get I feel like when I'm powering out and kind of proving to people that you can make a difference and be seen. And I think because of my age, I've gotten a lot of people that are into mountain biking and swimming or other sports that say, you got me off the couch, or you made me realize that at 40, I'm not done. And so that's the other part, is I hope I'm inspiring more people to just do something, do what they love, and don't let the age thing stop you. Because people always like, aren't you worried if you're going to fall? But, I've fallen doing other dumb things, tripping on stuff. And at least, I luckily have the muscle and bones from lifting that's going to help me be able to fall and just get back up. Like, falling, it shouldn't be like a death sentence.
I want to bring in something deeper here. Your family, as Japanese Americans, from what I know, lived through the trauma of World War II incarceration camps. So, how did that history maybe even shape your perspective growing up? This is 1960s, 1970s Santa Cruz, very white. You stood out just by the virtue of who you were. So Tell us how it shaped your approach to sports and your identity.
Well, I know one of the things my parents are like born in Monterey and Gardena, and they were all interned and sent to the horse stalls in Salinas, or they had like a what do they call it, assembly center at the different horse tracks in Northern California and LA, in Anaheim, Santa Ana racetrack. And I know that as much as they tried to just spoil us because they didn't have a lot, it made me really appreciate just having the freedom to go do whatever I wanted. And I didn't take it for granted that I could go skateboard or go horseback ride or whatever, because I knew that they went through a time where they just lost everything and that they had to build back up. And my dad was fortunate enough that my grandfather was a fisherman, and actually his boat is in the Cannery Row history books. And my parents, or my dad's side of the family, they had a house in Monterey. He lost his boat, but some family in Berkeley rented out my dad's house. And when they came back from internment camp, their house was still there, and there was soldiers from Fort Ord living in there. And so they shared the house for 6 months, where the soldiers lived upstairs and the family lived downstairs, and they were able to keep their home. Yeah,
Wow.
it was really fortunate. And that's like, my uncle did help produce a movie called Beyond Barbed Wire, and it was about the 442nd Troop, and I had two uncles in that. And so while their family was in internment camp, they were actually fighting for the U.S. Army. And so basically, I just feel very fortunate. And I think my parents kind of never had any, they weren't like bitter about it, like they just felt like, it was a time that changed their life, but they were able to move on. And my dad's 96. He's still alive. He was, I think, 13 when he was in camp. And I can't tell. I wouldn't tell. I would think he would understand. And he would be really disappointed that we're at that state again, where it's scary that they're just grabbing people off the street.
That is, yeah, no, sorry, that is such a uncanny observation that your dad has, right? Like, your family lived through that period when they were taken away for no fault of their own. And now we have families in California and all over the world, all over the country, who are also facing this constant nightmare. Your childhood was anything but typical. And did skating or picking that sport up, did it feel like maybe some kind of like quiet defiance, a way where you could just be yourself amidst all of the other chaos that must have been part of growing up in that era?
I think a little bit, yes, because I guess what's fun about skateboarding, and I still, it's a little bit of renegade sport. Like, you're not really welcome, but you just do it, and you're kind of like looking around and making sure, like, okay, I'm on this street. Am I going to get kicked out? Or, I've had neighbor, and when I was a kid, I had a neighbor run my cones down with their car. And then the wife came down the street, and I'm like, you don't need to do that. Your husband did that. So, I've had other people, I skated at lunch at one place, and I had some guy come down the street and just run them all over. And I stopped him and started yelling at him, and he apologized. Like, I got in his face about it because, one, he could have hit me. Two, why is he doing that? And so skateboarding is like, sometimes you have to sneak into a spot and you just try to not leave any marks and just go. And I still will jump fences or squeeze in between fences to go ride. If I go to the skate park too early and the gate's not open, who thought a 60-something-year-old would be climbing over the fence? But I was a kid and I did it, and I feel like, I'm just riding a little earlier than I'm supposed to. So I think that it's just part of one being independent, and two, just knowing that, as long as you're not hurting anyone or any property, you should be able to skate. And I have a funny story that one time we were skating in San Jose and they were having a criterium bike race and on this road. So we were like, okay, well, we can't skate here. So we went to this parking lot in an industrial complex and we set up cones, and, we're older. We always wear safety gear. And this Mercedes comes jamming up through the parking lot and over to us and said, skateboarders aren't allowed here. And I said, okay, well, if we see any skateboarders, we'll let them know. And he looked at me and he looked at all of us, like being a little older and wearing safety gear. He goes, oh, you guys look all right. Okay, well, and he just laughed and he said, I own this property and I saw you guys and I just thought I should kick you out, but you guys can stay. And I always laugh. My friends still laugh about that.
Andy Donaldson has swum some of the hottest channels in the world. But this moment isn't about records or distances. It's about what the water exposed in him mentally, emotionally, spiritually. He talks about leaving a stable job, finding himself unraveling mid-swim, and slowly putting those pieces back together again. There is so much vulnerability here and a lot of courage too. Not the brash or loud kind, but the courage it takes to let your life change direction when the old version of you no longer fits. Here's Andy. Andy, great segue into talking about the Ocean 7. And obviously, we don't have time to talk about each of these swims is so different. And so has been, I am sure, the planning, the preparation, and the execution. But your answer on how the swim in the quote unquote warm and placid waters in Hawaii, bringing on the toughest challenge, I'm just shocked hearing that, because all these swims take place in these really diverse places, different conditions. And to the outsider, it might seem that the Hawaii swim might have been, let's say, the, what they call a softball, like the easy one. And knowing you a little bit, I'm sure it wasn't lack of preparation. Was it just Mother Nature that brought conditions that you just did not expect?
Pretty much. So I'll take a tiny bit of a step back just to provide some context and then get talking about the Molokai Channel. So after Rottnest, had this success, discovered that I'm not bad at this stuff, this long distance swimming, that I wanted to continue and do more goals, achieve more goals, test myself. And we'd raised, I think, $12,000 for this mental health charity. So I saw an opportunity to combine purpose with sport. And really that was the genesis or the beginning of what went on to become this challenge to swim the Ocean 7, the world's 7 toughest channel swims. And I set out to do them all in the space of a year, which at that time had never been done. And do them, try to break as many records as possible along the way, partly for the challenge and my own aspirations, but also because I thought, right, if we're raising money for charity, how can we bring as much noise to this as possible? So I wanted to be quite outlandish with my goals. There was probably a fair bit of naivety in there as well. So, but that was the background. And so these swims, they're marathon swims all around the world, places like England to France, so the English Channel, the North Channel, which is Ireland to Scotland, the Cook Strait between the islands of New Zealand, the Molokai Channel, which is between two of the islands, Oahu and Molokai, over in Hawaii, the Strait of Gibraltar, Spain to France, the Catalina Channel, Santa Catalina Island back to Los Angeles over in America, and the Tsugaru Strait between Honshu and Hokkaido in Japan. And so they're all marathon in distance, sort of 10 miles and up. That's the shortest. The longest was the Molokai Channel, 44 kilometers, so about 30 miles. And I'd got off to this absolute ripper of a start. So in the English Channel, I'd broke the British record, set one of the fastest times ever. In the North Channel, aside from basically turning into an ice cube, again, swam the second fastest time ever. In the Cook Strait, broke the world record, went a time that was maybe about 90 minutes slower than the Inter-Islander ferry. Like the Kiwis were just going mad. It was all over the news. So I was coming into this next one, the Molokai Channel, with a fair bit of hype and expectation around me. I had all these wins. I was coming in fresh, hot, and I kind of fancied myself. And I thought to myself, right, let's go for the world record is 12 hours. I reckon I could get across here in 10 or under. And so that's where my mind was. And funnily enough, I'd been speaking to another swimmer that you've had on the podcast here, Sarah Thomas, and very incredible woman. If you don't know much about Sarah, check her out. She's one of the greatest of all time in ultramarathon swimming, has done phenomenal things. And I remember something that she'd said to me, which was along the lines of, just be ready for the day that Mother Nature tests you. Like, Mother Nature will humble you at some point. There's no doubt about it. Just be ready. And on those days, it's going to show you just how much you want this and really what you're made of. And so back in Hawaii, I dove in. We started at 7 p.m. at night. Sun, beautiful, like tropical island. Sun's going down. And I'm swimming along and I'm thinking to myself, all right, we're on here. I've got this. And, like we were talking about before, like everything that could have gone wrong pretty much went wrong. We set off and quickly discovered that the currents were pushing the wrong way. And, it brought my pace down from what is typically around 4.5 to 5 kilometers an hour, maybe down to under 3. So, as a swimmer that's swimming 44 kilometers, that's hours. That's adding hours onto your time. And that's just completely out of your control. The waves were rough, the swells were high, about 3 meters high. I was getting thrown around like a rag doll on a washing machine. And I was throwing up. I was disorientated. We were swimming through the night. My kayaker had forgotten to bring his lights, so he was like this silhouette of darkness out there. And I just felt so isolated. The boat was sitting maybe 100 meters away, and they turn off all the lights because they don't want to attract in the sharks. And I was just having the most rough swim known to mankind. I was really in a bad place. And I remember distinctly one of the toughest moments of my life. We were maybe 7 or 8 hours in, and I was nowhere near finishing the swim. I was nowhere near the other side. And I got this, every 15 minutes, I caught up with the boat. I would catch up with the boat. I'd get updates from the team on how I was performing. They'd pass me a drink and We would communicate on a whiteboard. But this time, Jay, my mentor and coach, he leans over to the side and he's like, Andy, I'm really sorry, but in the last 2 hours, you've not gone anywhere. You've traveled maybe two or 3 kilometers.
Wow.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, holy crap, what? And so the currents were so bad that we were just basically zigzagging around like this, just getting pushed side to side and not making really any real progress towards Oahu. And so, being an accountant, I was doing the maths in my head, 1.5 kilometers an hour, or it would be taking me 4 minutes to swim 100 meters. A far cry from the 1 minute 12 pace that I'd be holding in most of my other swims. And I was doing the maths and I was thinking, geez, that's 1.5 k's an hour to swim 40 something kilometers. Jesus, I can't keep going in this. Like, how it was like this dagger to the heart. And my mind started racing, like, why am I doing this? How am I going to keep pushing forward? What happens if I fail? We only have so much budget. Like, I can't come back here and do this again. We have aspirations to try to do this all in the space of a year. Like, your mind is racing, and it's very hard not to react in those moments. And so, yeah, it was a really tough journey, and I had to do a lot of soul searching. I'd never been pushed out of my comfort zone as much as I had in that point in time. It was just very exposing. And so, I think what ended up happening, I remember flipping on my back and just looking up at the sky. And, it's pitch black. You're a pin drop in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And there's no light, and there's just stars as far as the eye can see, just scattered across the sky. I slowed down. I tried to slow my thinking down, taking some deep breaths. I looked to the side. I saw the team out there on the boat. They're here with me every step of the way. I thought about my why. Why am I doing this? Why should I keep going forward? Yes, we had the mental health piece and trying to raise money for mental health. We had, the messaging around what we learned along this journey. How could we inspire others to pursue goals? I thought about my family, the people that supported me through thick and thin through my life, through this journey. My grandfather, who has been a big source of inspiration to me, someone that struggled with mental health as well, with their mental health as well. And, all of these things, that was my why. And I just thought to myself, well, I'm going to keep going for them. I'll find a way. And however long it takes, just one stroke in front of the other, we'll find a way through this. And sure enough, as a team, we made a decision to try push further north. Instead of staying to the same line, we managed to escape the currents. It was going to add an extra 10 kilometers onto our swim, but that was better than swimming nowhere. And we really just broke that challenge down into manageable chunks. You don't climb Everest and look to the summit. You just look 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot in front of the other. And you eventually get there, and that's what we did in that swim. And it didn't get easier. The conditions worsened. There was this unforecasted storm that we ended up swimming into, but we pushed on, and together as a team, ended up finishing and getting across to Oahu in just shy of 16 hours. So way longer than I'd ever experienced before. I'd never been in the water for more than 9 hours before. So this was way out of the comfort zone. But, you know, it's like life. You get hit with these unexpected challenges, and you learn more from those than you do from the good times.
Jamie Whitmore has faced things most of us hope we will never have to face. Cancer took so much from her physically, emotionally, professionally, and yet what strikes me most when she talks is how much light she continues to give back. In this clip, she shares what that period was like and how she rediscovered meaning through sport, motherhood, and service. It's not a story about pushing through pain. It's about deciding who you want to be on the other side of it. Jamie, this quote from you is indeed quite profound. That when you couldn't see the light, you had to become the light. Could you maybe help remember one or two things from that period where you manifested this quote of yours?
I'd say the first one was when I found out the cancer had come back. I can remember sitting in the doctor's office and I was smiling because I was so excited to tell them, like, hey, I'm swimming every day and I am lifting weights. And then I would drive to San Francisco and I would get radiation, and then I would drive home, and it was like that was my day. I'd get up in the morning, work out, go do radiation, drive home, and I would just be exhausted from it. And so on day 4, I was so excited because they had called me into their office, and you could, like, doctors have this like straight face. They're just like, and so I'm sitting here telling them, like, it's so great, and I'm finally off my walker, and I've got this cane, and my AFO's working, and you could tell that they had something to tell me. And he said, you know, Jamie, we don't know how to tell you this, but your cancer's back. And I looked at him and I still kept smiling because I was not going to let them wipe that smile off my face. And then he said, it's much more aggressive and it's faster growing than we thought. Like, they thought it was kind of slow to medium, and it was a very aggressive cancer. It was a sarcoma. They were worried it was going to spread. And I still was smiling, and they kept saying, so we need to have another surgery because it's already the same size. It's grapefruit. And I just kept looking at him. And I left the office, and I felt this very heaviness over me that, oh my gosh, like this is real. Like, I could die. Like, I survived all of that. I've been, you know, going along with life, trying to make the best of being disabled, told I'd never run again, maybe never ride a bike. And now you're telling me the cancer's back. And it was such a long drive home. And I had to call my ex-husband at the time, or my husband at the time. I had to call him. I had to call family, and I had to tell everybody, like, we're not done. Like, I'm not done. And we had already set another surgery date. And I remember for about a day, because that's all I would allow myself, a day, I was crying and I was processing. And then I woke up the next day and I was like, I can't let this change me. I still have to fight to the bitter end, and I'm not done. So I went to the gym the next day and I carried on, and people would look at me and I would just say, you know, here I am, like, I'm doing this. I did, but I remember that heaviness and then fighting that and looking to the positive of, well, I can still swim. I can still work out. I can still, like, inspire others to not give up. Like, somebody's probably worse off than me right now. And it was like that. I would show up to radiation and there'd be all of these ladies sitting in this room because you'd wait. And they were so sad. Like, you could just see the heaviness on them. And when I would walk into a room, it was like I lit up the room. I would start sharing stories and I would tell them all of this stuff. And I had many people, like, search me out, Google me, and send me emails saying that they were really scared about starting radiation, but after meeting me, they knew they could do it. And it was so empowering, right? Like, knowing that I could make a positive difference for others. And it's just, I just allowed that to fuel me. And then I just kept being a light. I would say the next time was when I got sepsis and almost died after the second surgery. Cause I was like, I just had it with hospitals. And it was, and again, it was another time that was just really hard. And I was running a fever. I didn't know where I was. I was becoming very like, what's going on? And I was having to have all these tests and stuff to make sure it hadn't affected my heart. And then it was just another setback. I was so ready to like start riding my bike. I had just beaten my second cancer surgery, and now I'm almost going to die because of sepsis. So that was another really hard time. And once again, it just had to do with people like emailing me or coming to visit me at the hospital and just like sharing how much of an impact like I had made thus far. And I just thought, well, I got to keep going. I can't give up. And so I got out of bed and I would like hobble to the nurse's station on my walker. And it was just this refusal. My dad always taught me, you can't give up in life. Like you can't allow that to be part of your vocabulary. You have to, when you start something, you finish it. And I had this motto that I was going to be like Ned Overend. And I was going to be racing well into my 50s and be super competitive. And I was only 32 at this time, right? Or 31. And I just thought like, this can't be the end of my story. I can't let cancer win. I can't let cancer dictate my next chapter. And so there was just this refusal of like, no, I'm going to decide my next chapter. So that was how I could continue on and be the light. Was that just that refusal to give up, I think.
One other thing I sense from your story is that you took it upon yourself to also get your message out. And that started inspiring others. But I also sense that service maybe came back to you because you found this purpose, maybe in some ways different, maybe even greater than your calling as just an athlete. And sounds like it came back to give you this mission that you can't let yourself down, and you can't let your legion of fans down in your fight.
You've kind of nailed it. Like I'm a person of a very strong faith, like very strong faith. And I felt my sense of purpose. And I often told myself that if I could help one person, then everything I went through was worth it. And that 100% gave me motivation, because for me, it was, this is part of God's plan for my life. And I need to honor it. Like that's the thing, is we all have this opportunity while we're here on earth to make the most of it, right? To have the biggest impact. And you're either going to take from that or you're going to give. And I'm a giver. I really like pouring into people. It's why I'm coaching high school, because it's so important. Like people need to know that they're valued as a human being. Like they're valued for showing up every day. You don't have to be the fastest runner, but you can show up every day and be part of this great community. That you have to try. Like I would always tell my kids ever since they were little, you have to try. You have to try. You don't know. You don't know where you can go or what doors will open up or what you're going to like if you don't constantly like try things. And then you can decide, I don't like that. But yeah, for me, it's definitely being out there. As you can tell, I'm an extrovert. And I love meeting people and just learning about them and then sharing my experience, so that hopefully if they ever encounter something that they think, oh my gosh, I can't do this, they can remember the time that they met me and say, yes, I can. Yes, I can. Like that's my whole goal, is teaching people that, yes, you can. You can do it.
One of the things I appreciate about Andy McVitie is how he makes movement feel less intimidating. A lot of us have reached a point, because of age, pain, stiffness, or injury, where moving again can feel risky or even a little scary. And Andy has this gift for breaking things down into simple pieces: hips, ankles, feet, and explaining them in a way that makes everything feel doable again. This clip isn't a dramatic story, it's more like an invitation, a reminder that rebuilding trust in your body can start with the smallest possible action, and that confidence often comes from understanding, not force. Here's Andy.
Is there maybe a simple drill you can teach us, Andy, on how to simply just test for ankle strength or ankle mobility, on whether we are doing fine with that level of mobility, or one needs to maybe just add some strengthening or stretching into one's routine?
There's a few. I mean, the classic sort of, and within the ankle here, I'm going to include the muscles above that of the calf, which are super important for
Absolutely,
power, propulsion, that type of thing. So there are some absolute classics like the heel raise, so you stand on your toe, very light amount of support into a point such as a wall, and can you achieve the sort of standard thinking for a number is around about 25 single leg calf raises for somebody maybe who runs, that type of thing. But they're actually quite hard to do and quite hard to measure. People will go at different speeds, so they might smash out 25 in a handful of seconds, 12 seconds or something, whereas it might take somebody else a minute. Well, that's very different regarding endurance and strength if we're looking at that. So they have to be sort of standardized, often with a metronome, reaching a certain quality with each repetition. People will do all sorts when you ask them to raise their heel off the floor. They can lean forwards to make it happen. They can bend at the knee to make it happen. And that's actually not loading the calf. Now, me looking at that tells me something about that person, and why aren't they wanting to go there? Why is the nervous system avoiding and such like? But your calf raises, in whatever way you choose to do them, are a good measure of overall ankle function, I suppose. There are other things to look at: eversion, inversion. It's a little bit tricky to be talking about measuring those. There's the knee to wall test. So if you place your foot at the bottom of a wall and lean forwards with your knee, how far can you take your foot away from the wall and still touch with your knee without the heel raising off the ground? And looking at differences again, I would say, is the main thing. Noticing is one much different than the other. There are some norms for that. Round about sort of 10 centimeters is a nice distance to be able to achieve. I've seen normal, that's not an issue, with a lot less, and I've seen much greater, because we're all on that curve somewhere. So it's having a look at yourself and finding what's normal for yourself. It is quite a complicated joint. It's like saying, what are the things to look out for in the shoulder? Well, there's tons, and some can be quite tricky to measure as well. So it's not but it's having a benchmark, having an idea. Can I do 25 good quality heel raises? And if you test again next year, I can only do 15. Something's happened there, hasn't it, that we might need to address and look into.
So I think the heel raises, it seems like that's one really good benchmark, because that was part of my physio program, and then I've had other friends tell me the same thing. So just very quickly, so this is just articulating the drill for people listening. Please correct me. I think it is balancing on one leg and using minimal amount of support with your hands,
like a finger on a wall or something.
That's a good one, finger on the wall. And then starting from the heel on the ground,
Mhm.
and then raising it all the way up as much as one can.
Yeah.
And I think that's one rep. And then
Yeah.
doing it 25 times.
Yeah.
Is there an indication on how high we should raise the knee? Oh, sorry, how high we should raise the ankle? And
Yeah.
second is, will it improve the drill if we start from like an elevated surface, like a stair,
Mhm.
like a step, and then go down lower? Because when one does that, I know it also helps stretch out, the calf a little bit.
Yeah, and you're working through full range at that point, and that's super relevant for climbers. If I was going to work as an exercise, then potentially, yes, we would go there with the heel being free and ready to drop down lower than the toes are. But for a standardized test, I would go from the floor most of the time, unless there's something really specific. I have just remembered there is an app called Calf Raise,
Oh,
which is free, I believe, I think, or certainly very cheap, if not free. And it's an attempt to set up and film yourself doing it. And it's one of these that uses, that's quite common now in weightlifting and Olympic lifting, where people want to track the bar and track the bar velocity and that kind of thing. And it will measure your ankle and your height that you're gaining with each. Because yes, you're quite correct. One of the things to look out for is when you can no longer reach that high point. And that's I forget the correct term now. Is it functional failure or something like that? Or, you've not actually failed. You could still probably do quite a lot of, quite a few more calf raises. But for the purposes of the test, that's a fail. The quality has dipped. And so it is 25 good quality calf raises. But yes, that app, I had forgotten about it. I've used it a few times now, and it seems quite good. Gives lots of information for physios and such like as well. But you can just use it. It will measure your height, and it has a timer on it as well. It's recommended as well to use a metronome, sort of 1 second up, 1 second down, 1 second. So we've got that standardized approach to it, so that people don't cheat, because the body is fantastic at cheating.
Susan Mary Conrad spent weeks alone in Alaska. And if you have ever been in a place that wild, you know it has a way of stripping everything down to what is essential. In this moment, she describes a night when the world felt way too big. Whales surfacing beside her kayak, darkness pressing in, weather changing faster than she could respond. What she found in that discomfort shaped why she went back a second time. Here is Susan. But maybe you can take us into the daily reality of a day while you were doing this expedition. Perhaps things like, where would you sleep? What did you eat? Like, what would be a good day or a bad day? How would that feel like out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one way, like just breaking it down to one day, that's like mentally wrapping your brain around a multi-month expedition. Anybody, well, I shouldn't say anybody, but it's not that difficult with a certain skill set to paddle one day, right? You pack the boat, you click off some miles, you stop for lunch, take some photos, you find hopefully a suitable campsite, because you are dealing with this extreme intertidal differences where, setting up camp and breaking camp entails schlepping that gear in the kayak itself, sometimes the equivalent of up to 2 football fields over some pretty messy, uneven, and sometimes very dangerous terrain. But you find a suitable camp, hopefully. You set up that camp, catch up on your journal entries, ingest thousands of calories, and you climb into your tent and you have a good sleep. And then you get up in the morning, reverse everything, and then repeat. So if you can do that one day, it's the mental game of breaking it down into bite-sized chunks. And much like I did for the whole expedition, it's too overwhelming to look at the whole map, the whole chart of the Inside Passage. But if you break it down, like most paddlers do, via the resupply ports. So for me, there were 7 sections that were structured around my 6 ports of call. So these were towns that I would paddle into to retrieve my supplies that were mailed ahead to those towns. And that makes it much more manageable. And then these ports become kind of like a milestone for the next section. You get to get a roof over your head and hopefully a pillow under your head, a shower, ingest as many calories as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Socialize a little bit, right? That's the big part of it, is just eating your way through these towns. And then you set off on the next leg of the adventure. So,
for sure. You describe, like, let's say, a day that you would want to happen, like a day which would start like this, which would have a bunch of paddling and then camping and eating. So that is perhaps a day on script.
yes.
So here's a funny question. So if you think back, roughly, like, out of, let's say, in your last crossing, how many days do you think were just like the one you described versus the ones where things went off script?
Yeah.
things went awry for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah, and Mother Nature, for the most part, Mother Ocean is going to dictate that. There were days where I had plotted out on my chart, this is a 20-mile a day, which was pretty typical for me, 20 to 25 miles a day. But I set off, and within a couple miles, it's like, no. Like, the wind kicked up, the sea state kicks up, it's a headwind, you just can't even paddle against it anymore. It just makes no sense. So you turn around. You either go back to where you were or you hack out, which typically, this happened probably 15 to 20% of the time, where you're hacking out a pretty miserable campsite, but you are so thankful just to get off the water. Yeah. And then also bears, right? That is a big, you talk to any Inside Passage paddler, and one of their biggest fears is encountering bears in camp. And there was one day where I was actually going to go around this headland and out into the exposed Pacific. And conditions seemed okay at the time, but once I got around the corner, it was the same kind of thing, like, just going to go with my intuition on this one, which has always been, pretty good. And so I turned around and I landed on this small island that it actually had camped on in previous expeditions. Other paddlers had camped there. We all know that bears can swim, but I really wasn't thinking of bears at this time. And it's still early in the day, and I hadn't set up camp yet, fortunately. And I had just paddled a couple of miles, and a mama bear and a cub show up, like, just come galloping out of the forest, and came to a screeching halt within, maybe 30 feet of me. They were that close. And I didn't have my protection on me. My bear spray was in the kayak, which was stashed behind a log. I had food in my hand. It was lunchtime. I had food in my hand. And I've just shocked or scared a mom with a cub. You couldn't be in a more dangerous situation. So that idyllic little island was very short-lived. Obviously, I survived the encounter. She wasn't aggressive. She ran back into the woods after I went ballistic. And I packed up that boat so fast, paddled back down this channel. I had come up earlier that day where I discovered this little fording platform. It's where fishermen sort their nets. It was just in the middle of this narrow channel, and there were a couple of fishing boats nearby, and I explained what happened and asked if I could, sleep on that float, because there was no way I was sleeping on land that night, because they were so close. And they said, yeah, of course, you'll be safe here. So that was a plan B that, worked out to my advantage. But there's no known outcome, and that's what makes it an adventure, right? Otherwise, we could all just go to Disneyland.
30 feet in front of Mama Bear and her cub. When it comes to, people imagining like animal encounters of the dangerous kind, it doesn't sort of get more scary than that.
Yeah.
You did not have your base spray on you. Did you practice any safety maneuvers? I feel like every time you go through, every time you do some research on like fending off wild animals, you hear something different. Should I run downwind? Should I make myself bigger? Should I turn away, or should I stare down? Like,
Right.
what is actually effective?
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it happens so quickly. These encounters always happen so quickly. You're not expecting them. And she was so close, and I just remember my eyes locking on her hump, right? And that's when you say, oh shit, this is a grizzly. This is a grizzly bear. And I could see the gradations in her fur, like going from like this beautiful, almost coppery brown to a darker black, and then down to the claws, like these massive claws, and then the little cub right behind her. But, it took my brain a few seconds to calibrate like what was happening, because I hear the galloping first, and then all of a sudden she's in front of me, and I'm like literally 2 or 3 seconds that seemed like an eternity. And did I do the right thing? I didn't have my bear spray on me, and all of a sudden I had like Michael Jordan jumping abilities. I just jumped on this log like Superwoman, and I just started yelling and screaming and waving my hands. Now, she wasn't being aggressive. If she was being aggressive, then what I've researched and people I've talked to is that you make yourself small, right? You're not a threat. Just keep on moving. But she wasn't being aggressive. She was just right there. And so I just helped her know that, I'm here. I'm human. I'm not a bear. I'm human, and I'm not really a danger to you, but just like, we're not jiving, just go away. And I was very lucky that's what happened. And when I paddled into a small port a few days later, and I talked to some hunters, fishermen, people that have lived in these waters, all their lives, and asked them if I did the right thing. And they were like, well, you're here to talk about it. I guess I did the right thing, but it was really just, it wasn't my time. It wasn't my turn. And I was just incredibly fortunate that she wasn't being aggressive.
This next comes from the second part of my conversation with Jim Donini. We did 2 episodes together, and honestly, both are worth listening to in full, because Jim carries 6 decades of mountain and adventure and climbing wisdom in a way very, very few people can. Yes, beyond all of that, he also shares some invaluable life wisdom on how to live a life well with all of its quirks. For this highlight reel, though, I chose just one moment from part 2 where he talks about the partners who shaped him, the trust that develops in storms, and the emotional cost of spending a lifetime in the high mountains. It's one of the most honest parts of our whole chat. And if it resonates, yes, go back and listen to both episodes, because this is just a glimpse of the depth Jim brought.
You have to be able to embrace failure, because there are so many factors that come in that will keep you from doing a climb. Largely the weather, conditions. So many times I've gone into a climb and conditions weren't right, the weather wasn't right. You can get up and they come back the next year and do it. So what was I getting? So my theory has always been getting to the top is optional. Getting back down is obligatory.
Yeah.
You get back down, you can always go back. If you don't get back down, that's it. You're over, you're done.
Exactly. And you develop this, uncanny sense, perhaps, Jim, of knowing when to turn back. So getting back to that, like, like maybe you can talk about maybe one of your more difficult decisions,
All
but
right.
maybe in hindsight, you were correct.
That's a good point because that's real critical. Young climbers say, what's the most important thing I need to do to get into serious alpine climbing? So the most important thing is your partner. Now, one thing I learned when I was in Special Forces, I was on an operational 12-man A team. I learned that you had to have faith in your partners so that they could watch your back when you were, for example, if you're on a climb, you can't have your A game every day. You want to have a partner that if you're having a bad day, they're out front. And I've learned that the sport, one of the things, you read the chapter about the climb in China when there were 4 of us.
Yes.
The community. I decided at that point that I always wanted to climb with just one other person. And that person is critical. What you have to have in a person like that is, first of all, they have to buy the plane ticket. What I mean by that is that a lot of times you'll get some, oh, yeah, I'll go. And when it gets time to buy the plane ticket, they, oh, well, I can't go. So you want somebody that's going to be reliable. You want somebody who's going to have the same level of commitment you do. Maybe not more, maybe not less, right about the same level of commitment. Because when you're on an alpine climb, there are so many temptations to go back down. Because let's face it, we're doing these new big routes and big faces. There's the danger element, there's the weather, there's the work, you're cold, you're not eating well. So it's not that much fun sometimes, and it's so easy to make an excuse.
I mean, there are more reasons. There are multiple X more reasons to want to go down than to stay.
Yeah, it's very easy, I think, to have an excuse to go down. But if you don't push hard when you're alpine climbing, you'll never get up. But if you push too hard, you'll never get to climb again. So there's this fine line between pushing too hard and pushing not hard enough. And I don't know how to define that. I guess I've been lucky because I've always pushed really hard, like right cock, but a lot of times I come down. But you got to push that umbilical cord, but you don't want to break it. So it's hard to decide. I've had a lot of luck because I've always gotten back down. Here I am. I've never even been injured by climbing.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, what I'm learning is you have had this really unique combination of this burning desire and talent and maybe luck to want to go and do some of the most, let's say, outrageous climbs, first ascents. Yeah. But you've also had the savvy to know when to stop.
Well, I think for alpine climbing, there's some factors. You need to have a certain skill set. You have to have the skill. You need to have good judgment. Because you can look at a face, you can say, okay, it looks like going over there safer. There's not, you can always pick out a route that is maybe going to have less objective danger than other routes. But there's no big route on an alpine climb that's totally safe. So you have to have good judgment. You have to have good skill set. A little luck doesn't prove.
May I ask you this question? Over the decades, since you first went to the Tetons and the Karakorums, yes, technology has come such a long ways. Better training, better gear, and also just superior weather forecasting. But we still hear of accidents in the Alpine like every year. You talked about Kyle Dempster and his partner sadly perishing, and these things happen. So in your perspective, like, what is it that climbers or alpinists of today are maybe not heeding? Are they being too aggressive? Is it something else that's still causing, that still continues to make alpine climbing so dangerous?
Well, alpine climbers keep pushing harder and harder routes. And alpine climbing is never going to be totally safe. And I think I've always exercised good judgment. But even if you exercise good judgment on a route and when to go and when not to go, there's still factors up there that are going to create dangers that you can't mitigate. You can mitigate, but you can't eliminate. So, to some extent, maybe I've had some luck too. Here's another thing. My first alpine climbs were in Patagonia, and then Alaska and Karakoram. But I've always wanted to. For example, in Alaska, I've done a lot of first ascents all around Denali. I've never stepped foot on Denali because, to me, I want to do the technical climbs, things like the Moose's Tooth, Mount Bradley, the Cotton Spire. I had no interest kicking steps in snow to get to the highest point. So I remember when I moved to Seattle to work for Patagonia as a regional sales rep, and my wife at the time, we ended up developing a bunch of friends, and we go to parties, and I'd be introduced as the climber, right? So people go up to me and say, "Well, have you climbed? How was Mount Rainier?" I said, "Mount Rainier? I haven't climbed it." And they would go, "You haven't climbed it?" I go, "Well, I've only been here for a few years. You got to work your way up to that."
Yeah.
They look at me like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with this guy?" Because they knew a guy, the next door neighbor, who was out of shape that had climbed it.
Yeah.
Never been, and I still I'd never climbed Mount Rainier. I had no interest. I'm more, So for me, it's remote peaks that not other people aren't on, peaks that take some real work and technical ability to get to the top of. So I like around Mount Fork or Mount Hunter, all those peaks that are surrounding Denali, but not Denali.
Seb Bird is one of those rare athletes whose actions line up exactly with his values. Yes, Seb is a bit young for the show, but I was just so inspired by his approach to adventure sports. I knew I had to bring him on the podcast. In this clip, he talks about sailing to Yosemite instead of flying and dedicating his dawn wall ascent to something bigger than climbing. What I love here is that none of this is performative. It's not about being extreme for the sake of it. It's about living in alignment, choosing the harder path because it's the right path for him. Here's Seb. I suppose I should really ask you in a blunt way, what values guide you today? And is there like some kind of story with how you arrived at this, what seemed like, a dramatic shift in lifestyle?
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like, as human, I think we all have like a lot of contradictions, and it's not always easy to face them. And I would say it's something I really try to do nowadays, like to just like really embrace those contradictions and try to be honest about myself, about, not just saying an environment and like the ecological aspect of life is important, just like act on it as much as I can. And try to face all that and get informed and go deep into those topics, like and in the social struggle, in the environmental struggle, and try to really connect and implement that in my climbing, or at least as much as I can.
Is there maybe a broader cultural shift that might be happening, especially in Europe, around ethics, around social responsibility? Because, when I think about my life in the US, nobody's stopping flying. Like I cannot think of too many people who are like doing that kind of radical change in their lives. So is that maybe something around your environment or just something else?
Yeah, I think there is a big difference, like talking about the flying thing, uh, between Europe and the US. Somehow, in Europe, I know many friends and people who really try to go less on planes and think really about that. For me personally, I think I had like many different steps in the way I'm today. Like from friend, I think it's mostly friends, like talking to people and like being, yeah, having debates with people and trying to. Nowadays, I also like read a lot and listen to a lot of podcasts. So maybe that also helped me to to change or
It's
try
interesting.
to
Like
improve.
the moment you go down that rabbit hole, you start going more into those voices, and the more you go into those voices, the more they start like shaping your thinking. So yes, it becomes like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
becomes unending. Like
On the other hand, I don't want to go like more radical and more radical all the time. So I think like sometimes it's not always nice to go like as pure as you can. Like there is a trap there where you also try to think as in a capitalist way again, like trying to be like to reach goal in your activism. And I think that's not something you want to do, like, because my idea is to go against like those kind of like goal targeted thing, and yeah, try to escape this way of thinking in a way. Yeah, I don't know if you get me. Like my
I think I do. No, I think I do, Seb. I am fascinated, and I would love to hear more. Like, what is that balance for you today in your life?
it's kind of hard to find a balance right now. I'm still in. I would say I'm always in a process where like I implement things. I think like I change others, and I would say that's the balance. Try always to rethink what you thought was right or wrong. And I would say, for example, that I was more radical about the flying 3 years ago than I'm right now. Even though I think I'm like right now, I'm way more into like I really want to do something into the like the social injustice and what's happening in Palestine, for example. I feel like that's the main battle. Even like talking about the environment, you can't talk about the environment when people are getting bombed. Like for me, it makes no sense. It makes no sense to say like let's try to drive less when you see like a genocide happening like not far. Like or people are getting killed, and I think that's something, yeah, or that you see that there is like still racism in France, like the whole system is still really racist. So I think that's something I want to fight more in the next month or year, or at least invest myself in those kind of struggles more than, for example, just the flying. Even though I'm still like I still want to act on the environment, and I think all these are linked.
I mean,
I think
it's
it's
complex.
linked.
It's complex. And you're right. I mean, having the right kind of prioritization is difficult because, yes, we don't want to get carried away by the small changes we make in our own life and forget what the big picture is and what's happening.
No, what I meant is like, I don't want to blame someone who is not like, who is flying, for example, to go climbing when like there is a really bigger picture of like big companies like killing the world or like yeah I think I really want to I want to try to see like the more systemic view of all this, and yeah.
Here's something I've noticed. Your Instagram said Belgian climber in pink tights. And
It's true.
yeah, in your pictures, you have, this, let's say this this light, fun style, you also seem just such a positive person, Seb. You seem optimistic and just just excited about possibilities. And behind that, I also see somebody who's committed and disciplined and obviously politically engaged. Do you sometimes think about that contrast? So there's humor on the surface, but are there also this heaviness about trying to face these huge issues underneath?
Yeah, of course, there are really heavy moments, I would say, more and more, I would say, in my life, or where I'm becoming more and more interested and conscious in those kind of topics. So I think it's indeed quite heavy. But on the other hand, I think it's also nice to keep in mind, to bring joy to those struggles. So I've done, for example, a few gathering over the past years with some big activist gathering where there are thousands of people trying to fight for the same cause. For example, we were blocking those things in France called mega bassine, where some really big industries take water from the small farmers for big we were struggling on we were gathering on this cause, and those people were bringing so much joy in the fight that it felt the right thing to do, just play music, smile, laugh, and still fight, and still struggle on, still go for it. I think you can do both. And I would say I was maybe a bit more optimistic before. For example, when I wrote the Belgian in climbing in pink tide, Belgian climber in pink tide on my Instagram, I would say I was a bit more optimistic at the time than I am now. But I think I still should be, as much as I can. We should be optimistic. We shouldn't lose hope and try. We should try to bring as much joy as we can in general.
Okay, I'm actually going to ask you a different question. So, at the summit of the Dawn Wall, you dedicated your ascent to the anti-fascist struggle. And I'm going to read a quote from you. I think you said, "Silence is complicity and resistance is a duty." And it's not something we see often in the climbing world. At this moment where you have achieved maybe this huge milestone, and then you dedicate your climb to this message. So what were you hoping for from that message? And do you think it achieved some kind of impact that you were intending?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't think I don't know if those kind of message can make the difference. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think some people get it, and that can make an influence on their self. They can say, "Oh, when I was a kid and I was looking at other climbers, professional climbers, I was always I was very influenced by what they said in life in general. So I would think that if I write that on a social media and there is I don't know, 20,000 of people seeing it, maybe a few of them must be influenced somehow, and maybe that can make a really really small difference. But I think it's still a drop in the ocean for sure. On the other hand, so that's maybe there is not much results. On the other hand, I think somehow it felt necessary to me to do something. I believe that when you have a platform, as I have, like, even though it's not a big platform, like I still have like something, I still have people reading what I write and listening what I say, I still have people. So I think it's like, as I wrote, I think it's a duty when you have a platform like that to express those kind of things, especially nowadays where there is a really, there is a real war on the social media. There is something happening there, like a war of ID. And that's why I think people who have a platform nowadays on social media should use it for their IDs. I think that's something you should do. And when I write like silence is complicity, it's a bit linked to this, where we all see on social media that like people are dying, that we know right now that global warming and climate change is gonna like probably destroy the whole life on Earth. We can all watch like documentaries anywhere talking about that, and yeah, I think we should say something, and that's why I did it. And yeah, even though that makes no difference, I think we should do it somehow, or at least to me, I would feel bad just talking about my climbing and only this, and going further about it.
This next one lands in a very different emotional place than the rest of this compilation. Chris has spent a lifetime chasing snow, filmmaking, and adventure. But in this clip, he talks about a trip to Mongolia that shifted his perspective in a way he did not expect. It is not a story about risk or physical challenge. It is about being humbled by a culture that lives with so much less, yet makes through the world with a kind of openness and generosity that's easy to miss in our modern lives. What Chris shares here is gentle, reflective, and grounding. It is a reminder that sometimes the biggest transformations happen internally in quiet moments far from home.
100%. There's several times where I've been completely off the grid. Well, I mean, if we would have had somebody get hurt or anything go wrong, that's when you realize how far away you are from help, which also takes you back to what were the pioneers doing? Captain Cook, that, out there just roaming the seas. And yeah, you couldn't call somebody for help. You couldn't call for rescue. When you went west in the United States with a horse and a trailer, and you're just off the grid. So I guess in some glimpses of the way I've gotten to feel that, and it's given me such great respect for our pioneers, for history, for all of that. And in answer to your other question is, it's made me a different person, but it's also made me realize how easy we have it right now. I think we lived right now during the best time of the human race. We're like, I can go over there and run hot water. I'm sitting here comfortably talking to you wherever you're at in a van. The things that we have taken so for granted. I can turn a light off and on, and it's just it's almost numbing because we're so used to it. But when you get to go on these trips and you go to these places, and then you realize in some of the places, this is how people live. And if your Western mind would like, oh my gosh, they're poor, they don't have these things. They aren't. They are not poor. They are living in equilibrium with the circumstances and the environment they're in. They're rich in a whole different way. And they're there and they're living life, which makes you realize, I don't need all this stuff. We're taking a lot of things for granted. And for them, like just the basic necessities that give them thrill and joy during the day, just down to the basics: family, food, warmth, shelter. I feel privileged that I've had at least glimpses of moment of being around that and with those people, and it has changed me, because I did think, oh my gosh, they're poor. They are not poor. Some super aliens might come here and think we're primitive, doing what we are right now, but and feel bad for us. But that's been the true blessing of this whole journey that I've been on, is that those opportunities to experience that. And because of that, I literally cherish everything that's around me right now.
Perspective indeed is everything, and one can be part of the, let's say, the wealthy 2%, 5% living in this country, and constantly be dissatisfied with one's circumstances. And one can also lead a life which might seem to an outsider of like extreme privation in the barren landscapes of Mongolia or somewhere else, and just not understand that one doesn't need all of these comforts. And I think another beautiful thing about being able to go deeper into these cultures through the lens of, let's say, adventure sports or something else is, if you're just a tourist, like you go for 2 weeks and you check off the boxes and you stay in your nice hotels, like you don't get to see that side. But you were out there trekking and commingling and spending time and maybe skiing with the locals there. I think it helps you gain a perspective of how rich their lives are. And I'm guessing that also helps bring across a different angle on somebody from the West to them. Because, you go out and you share these like precious moments. And I think it probably also shifts their idea of like, a white person from like the US is maybe more nuanced and maybe similar to us than what we would know just by looking at something on our screens.
One thing definitely, it's always funny that you definitely don't feel as tough as you think you are when you come across this, and then they look at us and all the things that we need to like get through the night and the luxuries that we have. So, for example, when we in Mongolia, we didn't know exactly where we were going to stay. We just started trekking, and with the horses and we were trying to find a tribe of the Tua Mongolians that live in these mountains. We didn't know where we were going to find them. And the way I explain to students when I go speak at schools, imagine coming into Denver, Colorado on a train 170 years ago, and then you hire some local Indians to trek you 100 miles into the mountains to go try to find this tribe of other Native American Indians that you've heard about, but you don't know quite where they're at. And apparently they do a unique thing. And that's what we did. And we trekked, and then we found literally in the middle of the night, we came across a man with his daughter on a horse, and they were, in that fur and everything else. It was a step back in time. And of course, they didn't speak our language. We didn't speak their language. But somehow we were able to communicate, and they pointed us, the man pointed us in the direction of what would be a home. And so we went up a hill and we got to this yurt and woke this family up in the middle of the night. And, they're off the grid. There's no power. There's no anything. We shocked the heck out of them. They invited us into their home because it was 30 below outside, and our horses needed to be fed, and we needed shelter and we needed to rest. And we traded. Money meant nothing to them. Like you couldn't offer them money, but we could offer food, we could offer other things. And then they actually gave up their beds, which were these big things on the floor. And in their living room, which was a dirt living room, and they had a fire going, and they had some of the young animals inside so they wouldn't be too cold outside, and they'd help keep the indoor clean. We walked into this world of this life. We took this step back in time. And again, I thought, I need to give one of these people my coat because their stuff doesn't look as good. And it turns out that their stuff was all more adapted to the environment than our stuff. And we had to come with so much stuff to even survive in that environment. And we were so cumbersome and so clumsy and moving. We just had so much that we needed to survive in their environment. And they were just laughing at how just clumsy we were as they moved around all the way down to the skis. So the next day we got to go out and ski with this family, and they have their homemade skis with their leather bindings, and there's horse hair on the bottom of the skis that is faced one way so they can slide forward, but they can walk up the hills. And they literally would slide down the mountain, climb back up, slide down the mountain. I'm sitting there putting all my gear on, and it took me 15 minutes longer. By the time I was ready to go back up the mountain with my AT gear on, they were at the top. And they had everything was just easier for them. They were and we were just like a clumsy mess with all this modern stuff.
I love ending the episode with Joan and Doug because their version of courage looks different from every other story in this compilation. It's softer, it's joyful, and it shows up in the simple choice to stay curious, to keep learning new sports, new skills, to train together, to support each other, and to explore what's still possible in your 70s. Their energy is so contagious. Here are Joan and Doug. Both of you are doing these things, well into your 70s, where so many of the people you used to maybe train with and race with are no longer doing that with you. And beyond maybe just sheer desire, is there something else that you have learned or incorporated about your thoughts on identity and maybe even longevity that is keeping you guys still in the game with maybe same kind of fire that you've had when you first got into it?
For me, I didn't find swimming till I was 65, but it was like the two trains merging to one. Like I had tried a whole bunch of other things, and I got in the water, and for some reason, it was the right time, and I suddenly realized that I was not so bad at swimming as I was. I'm very self-critical. So I don't think I'm a very good bike racer. I know I'm not the greatest runner, although I really love running still. But I also thought that it might be a good idea to hire a coach. So what do? I hired Trent Grimsey, the world record holder in the English Channel. And he sent me workouts and we would talk. And before I knew it, he invited me to swim the English Channel on a relay team. And that was, talk about getting out of comfort zone. I mean, that was, beyond anything that I had even thought about. I had done a couple of triathlons, short distance swimming, and Doug reminded me of the first time I got into a lake with this group that swims in Lake Washington. And I was
absolutely terrified. I was in tears. I was terrified. I hated it. And somehow something changed that I just fell in love with it. It was where I found peace for the first time. I wasn't competing with someone else. I wasn't feeling bad that I was off the back of the pack in a bike race. And I wasn't racing with anybody. So for me, it's the getting out of my comfort zone on a regular basis, which is like every day in the pool. The English Channel was one of the best experiences of life. I never thought I could do it. And believe me, when I was in that 60-degree water and my hand was touching jellyfish for half the time, I thought, just get me the hell out of here. But the doing something that I thought I couldn't do, really challenging myself in that way deeply, was and is really inspiring. So that continues to be the motivation. And now I've grown to, I mean, what got me through the pandemic, swimming. I mean, that pool is probably a saltwater pool by now. I cried so much in it, but that's the, you know, I can do anything in the pool. I can cry. I can think crappy thoughts. I can be pissed off at the person next to me, and no one knows what I'm thinking. I'm just swimming along, and it's peace.
John, you had, so how old were you when you swam the English Channel?
65.
Okay, so you were 65 when you swam the channel.
With a relay team.
With a relay team. And what I find remarkable in that story is that you decided you wanted to excel at the sport. And instead of maybe just looking for a coach in your normal swimming environment, in your community, you went and reached out to this world champion. And this world champ, like, they agreed to coach you as well. So, I mean, I don't know, like, if it's common for somebody who's won, like, world medals to have, you know, some random person reach out to them. And were they already impressed with, let's say, other things you had done? Why did they honestly just take on this person from the other side of the world as a student?
Let me tell you this. So 10 years later, I wanted to really improve my stroke. So the interesting thing is that swimming is very technical. It's a very, very technical sport. And I mean, you can just go in and swim like crazy, but to be proficient at it, it takes a ton of practice. Doug is always amazed at how much you need to swim to be able to improve. But it takes a lot of swimming to improve in it. And you have to, I always find it very interesting, and I'll get to your question, that swimming attracts very rigid people, which is it is so odd, because here we are, very rigid and have to have it my way people in this fluid environment. And you have to surrender. You have to surrender to what's happening, because if you fight with it, you'll get bitten back. You won't make it to the other end of the pool. If you're fighting to breathe, if you whatever. And so learning the technique so that you can, and all the coaches say, be one with the water. I have no idea what that means, sort of, until now, somewhat. But it's a concept that you can't, it's a feeling you can't get to until you're more proficient, because you have to trust. I mean, things that were such an anathema to me: trust, surrender, be in the moment. So what do I do at age 75? I saw a video of Brent Hayden, who was the Canadian bronze medalist in the 100 meters. Tons of swim videos at the Olympics here. Tons of swim videos. I get tons of them. Clothing videos and swim videos are the name of my social media. But so what do? I contact Brent Hayden. And he lives in Vancouver, which is like 2.5 hours from me. And I said, can I work with you? And told him a little bit of my story. And he said, sure. So I went up to Canada. I've been up a couple of times, and I sent him video of my stuff. And I would have to say that my stroke has improved by 50% since working with him just a little while ago.
To continue on, Doug, so again, as we were chatting, you discovered, let's say, your powers a little bit later, and then you dove right in. And yeah, I'm also wondering, like, if you are able to maybe point to maybe some things that you are doing or some things that you have that have allowed you this kind of consistency with running, including the fact that you hope to continue doing that for a long time. Are there some habits that you care to share that we can learn from?
Well, Joan and I have different theories on this, but I'll give you my theory or my philosophy when it comes to running. Basically, my story is that my success is because of my consistency, and my consistency is because I'm basically lazy. And what I mean by that is that, in particular, when it comes to running and especially ultra marathons, there's this real tendency to go out there when people first start doing it, and they fall in love with it. And it's understandable. You go out running on all these beautiful trails, and you go to beautiful places, and you meet all these interesting people, and it's something that you just want to do more and more of. But people, a lot of runners get to the point where they just want to do more and more of it without letting their bodies rest. And the end result of that is that you can keep that up for a while, maybe even, a number of years, but ultimately it catches up with you. And what happens is that most runners eventually quit running because of the fact that they get injured or they have some sort of chronic problem that is made worse by their running, whether it's related to their heart or, they have to have a hip replacement or a knee replacement, stuff like that. And oftentimes that's what ends their running career. By basically doing less, I give my body a chance to recover more often. And so, for example, I always take 1 day off a week from running. And so that I give my body the opportunity to rest and recover during that period. And also, I typically, during the year, I'll take typically a whole month off. Not running all together, but just doing anything intense. And once again, it's just allow my batteries to recharge. And so, I'm not saying that I never get injured, because I have been injured on occasion from overuse type of activities, but by basically not overstressing my body, it's allowed me to continue doing this for many more years than most of the people that I've run with. I mean, there's a lot of runners out there who I ran with 20, 30, 40 years ago who are not running today simply because their bodies are not capable of doing it anymore. I think this works for me. It may not work for everybody, but this approach certainly works for me and allows me to keep on doing it at the level that is sustainable. And I think that's key for me.
That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ageless Athlete podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show just as much as I enjoyed creating and producing it. Whether you are an athlete looking to push your limits or someone striving to maintain a healthy, active lifestyle as you age, there is always something new to learn. From Ageless Athlete, we bring you a fresh episode each and every week. If you liked what you heard, we would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an update. And if you really liked what you heard, please leave us a review, crush those 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. It helps us reach more people who are passionate about staying strong and resilient, no matter their age. Don't forget to visit our website and leave your email so I can send you occasional insights, stories, and tips to keep you inspired and motivated on your journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Ageless Athlete Podcast and on YouTube at Ageless Athlete Podcast as well for even more great content. All of these links are available on the show notes for this episode. This show is entirely produced by me, Kush Khandelwal, based out of California with the help of my trusted adventure pup Roger. Until next time, keep challenging yourself. Keep pushing those limits. Stay mentally and physically fit. Continue doing what you love to do. And my friends, stay ageless. Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you. We bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through prior episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.